Welcome to the Core Women Podcast, the place for women entrepreneurs, authors, and self-starters looking to build community and gain valuable insights through expert interviews with women at the top of their game. Join your host, podcaster, producer, expert coach, entrepreneur, and author, Dr. Summer Watson, as she aims to inspire and empower you through these candid conversations. Lean in and embrace the journey. It's time to start the show. Here's your host, Dr. Summer Watson.
Today on the Core Women Podcast, I would like to welcome Kathleen Gabriel, who is a strategic human resources consultant with over 20 years of experience in Silicon Valley and beyond. Kathleen is a powerhouse in transforming small businesses, helping them build people-centered HR strategies that drive measurable growth, employee engagement, and revenue success. From startups to nonprofits and medical practices, her consulting and human-first approach identifies each organization's unique DNA to turn everyday workplace challenges into powerful competitive advantages. If you're looking to lead with heart and strategy, this episode is for you. Let's jump right into this and welcome Kathleen.
Well, hello. It's so good to be here.
I'm so excited that you're here with me today. But before we jump into the aspects of your professional background and life, if you could describe your journey to this point in one word, what would that word be and why?
Okay, one word is tough, as I'm sure it is for everyone. But because of that, I'm going to say peripatetic.
Ooh, okay. Break that down. Break that down.
Peripatetic means moving from place to place, and it indicates sort of staying in one place for a short period of time and then moving on to another place.
Okay.
And the reason why I chose that word is my whole background comes from all kinds of different things. I started off thinking that I was going to be a theater professional. I went to college and grad school for the theater, and I got a master's degree in theatrical stage management. And that was my goal. And then I went through it and realized I don't want to do this for a living.
Really?
I love it, but it's not my life.
Oh, wow.
Then I just kind of did a bunch of other things and ended up being pulled into a startup because my brother was an engineer at a startup. And he said, "Hey, I think we need what you used to do for actors, but for engineers." And I said, "Mike, that's HR." And I'd been thinking about getting into human resources, but didn't really know how.
Yeah.
And I talked to this startup, and they're like, "Well, it sounds like you can help us. Whatever that looks like, it sounds like you can help us out." And I built a whole career on that. And I eventually got my master's degree in HR management, got my certifications, and all the things that go along with,
Yeah.
really committing to a career. But also, I was in startups for so long that you're not just in one stable place for a long period of time.
Yeah.
You're moving from place to place a lot with a lot of different perspectives and a lot of different goals. And then when I started my consultancy in 2020, I mean, consulting is just a whole matter of working with lots of different people in different places. So I think peripatetic really works out for this was not a clear path forward, but it was the right path forward.
Yeah. Okay, I can tell you for certain, I've never had that word.
You know what? I'm actually kind of relieved because that's one to, it's a deep pull.
I love it. I love it. You're bringing knowledge to me. I'm learning something every day. And I'm like, even though if you go way back into my history, I was an English major. So you'd think, okay, she knows lots of words. I don't know that word. So that's okay. I'm learning something every day. So thank you for that, Kathleen.
My
Thank
pleasure.
you. So, what was it about human resources that really grabbed you, that really started stimulating you in a way that you thought, this is it. I want to make this a career, but I want this to look different?
So I'm always drawn to chaos, and I don't know what that says about me, but I'm always drawn to that. Ooh, we have messy problems to fix. Let's dive in.
Yeah.
And HR is, comprised of messy problems that you need to dive into.
Yeah. Human problems.
Yeah,
Right.
human
Yeah.
problems. And I'm always drawn to people.
Yeah.
My whole life has been about where can I contribute? And how can I make my little corner of the world a little bit better?
Yeah.
So what draws me to HR is it is made of people. Organizations are made of people. And how do you organize that? How do you
Yeah.
make that function? My whole philosophy in HR and in people and in life is people are weird and messy. And I've said that for a million years. And that to me means that we have all of these different goals and issues, and we all want something from this. And yeah, you can narrow it down to people want money because we work for money in a capitalist world. And it's like, well, okay, that is part of it.
Yeah.
Fundamentally, people want to have meaningful work for them, and they want to be appreciated and treated humanely. They want to be treated with dignity. And what I found was that HR is kind of that fulcrum place
Hmm.
where you can try and fail or you can try and succeed
Yeah.
to really build an organization that believes in and enhances all of those values. And as a consultant, I honestly find it easier to do it because it's a little harder to do that from the inside, especially if you're in an organization that hasn't maybe thought about those kind of values and actions before. So as a consultant, I can work with people who are already at least starting to think about, well, how do I want to build this company? How do I really want to be in this world of business with my employees? And founders, business owners, they own a business because they know how to do the thing they're doing. They don't own a business because they're necessarily experts in business operations, and why would they? And so they find other people and other services to fill in those gaps and build that foundation with them and for them. And so I get to work with really exciting people with exciting ideas who have the goal of being successful in their business, making the money they want to make, building the business they want to build, and also understanding that the people that they work with are human. And how do you navigate that? I love it.
I think when you think about HR, human resources, you think sterile, you think rigid, you think a
Yeah.
lot of times when you go into a for-profit company in particular, that they're going to follow this very rigid approach to understanding human behavior or not understanding it and just saying we're following the technical guidelines of this program or these laws because we don't want to get into more stickiness.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
And I get that side of it too. So, how do you, in fact, bring in that people centered expertise where you have that nice balance of, yes, we have to follow these constructs to a certain degree and the laws. However, we want to make sure that you feel valued
Yeah.
as an employee, that you feel part of this creative community. And that balance is so important, even to change the framework of how people see HR, being able to feel like they can
Yes.
go to HR and ask a question because are they working for the company or are they working for the people? So, how do you create with the owner of a young business, of a startup, that balance? How do you create that flow of energy within that company? How do you help that business owner?
I mean, that is a big question, and it's the question because you're absolutely right. A lot of employees are now of this mindset, and I do not blame them. I totally understand. The mantra is HR is not your friend. Don't
Yeah.
go to HR if you need help because they work for the company.
Yeah.
And especially in some organizations, dead true.
Yeah.
Certainly in larger organizations, much more likely to be true. And not through anyone's fault exactly, because I know a ton of HR professionals who got into HR for similar reasons to me, who want to help people but aren't necessarily empowered to. And we're all just trying to survive. And sometimes, yeah, you get paid by the company, so you got to do what the company says. That's another reason I like being a consultant because I can choose who I work with. And if it's not working out with a client, I can say, you know what? I think you need to find different help because I can't give you what you need. So I can work with people who at least have the general mindset of, yeah, I want to treat people generally well within the context of the resources I have. And then what I can do is I can look at what they have and look at what their goals are and work with their finance people and say, really, what do you have? Where have you been losing out on opportunities? Where have you been hemorrhaging money on people? And where should you invest? Because having employees is the most expensive investment a business can make, but it's also, for growth, a necessary investment because you can't grow past a certain point just on your own as a solopreneur. You've got to bring in employees to make these goals. Well, make sure that you're hiring the right people at the right time. Make sure that you're really thinking about, well, what kind of people do I want to work with? What kind of people will not just have the general skills to build the thing that I'm building, but also will work with me in the way I want to work with people? Where do I find such people and how do I interact with them and how necessary is it for them to be in person or distant or whatever kind of options you have? How important is it that they think like me or bring in new and exciting ideas?
Right.
How do I bring in people with new and exciting ideas and still make them feel welcome?
Yeah.
How do I offer them benefits when I have like 3 employees and we're still kind of gearing up and we're not funded? We're just a company.
Right.
What do I do about that? And then if someone is falling off track, how do I manage that? How do I reward people? All of these questions that come into just the fact of I hired a person, and that is before you start thinking about how do I comply with federal, state, and local labor laws, for they are legion.
Right.
Having spent over 20 years in California, no labor laws scare me. So I
Good for
can
you, man. That's awesome because there are a
I
lot of laws out there, right?
uh-huh,
And so you
there's a
need to be
ton.
aware and they change all the time. So
They
to hear you
do.
say that, that's pretty awesome. So,
Yeah, but that's all of it is it's not just the one thing. People aren't plug and play.
right.
You can't just say, "Oh, I'm hiring a person and that's going to solve my problem." You really have to look at it as why am I doing this and what do I have and what resources do I have to interpret that into a strategy? And that's what I bring to my clients is I speak to people and I talk to people and I want to understand really what's going on, not just, oh, you're an employer with 5 employees and these are the rules you need to follow. And therefore, I'm washing my hands of the situation because you should be able to figure it out from here.
Yeah.
No, there's very few situations that are that cut and dried.
They never are, especially when you're dealing with human beings.
The example I always give is the difference between consultants on a 1099 and employees on a W-2. That is such an important difference at federal and state levels that you would think there would be a bright line definition of what is one and what is the other. And it's not. It is based on a preponderance of evidence and a preponderance of risk. And when you're just trying to run a business and you then have to interpret preponderance of evidence for something that you've never considered before, it helps a lot to have someone in your corner who has practice at that, who has knowledge of that, and who can say, okay, look, here's where I see your preponderance of evidence, and here's where I see your risk coming in, and this is what I recommend you do, and here's how we make that happen. Because even if legally speaking, you should have one of your consultants be an employee, what if they don't want to be? What if it serves them better to be a consultant? And you're like, oh, but the work you're doing isn't consultancy. How do we navigate that? And even what do you do as you grow? I just had a client say in despair, did I hire all the wrong people? And my answer was no. You hired the right people at the right time, and now your company's changed.
Yeah.
So they may not be the right people right now, or they may just be doing the wrong thing. Maybe they just need redirection. But you're going from an all hands on deck, everybody is a generalist because we can't afford for anyone to be a specialist, to, oh, we can't afford for everyone to be generalists. It's not scalable. That's not reasonable.
Yeah.
Therefore, what the heck does anyone do at this company?
Those are a lot of important questions, right? And even when you
Yeah.
talk about the difference between that 1099 and that W-2 and that preponderance of evidence, the risk. Even when I was creating my contracts and I was consulting with a lawyer, he said, we can't put this language in here for tax reasons into this contract, right? For
Yep.
your 1099 employees. We have to change the language by just a phrase that
Yeah.
will be the preponderance of evidence to show that they're actually 1099 consultants, right? So it's so important from all different variables or factors where you're looking at who you're talking to, who you want
Hmm.
to hire, how you are hiring them, your contracts, what you're putting out on your website, because again, it's a building of evidence, right?
Yeah.
We can go deep into that, just that area alone. But I do want to get onto a few of the other questions I have because
Yeah.
there's so much here to cover. Throughout your years of experience in human resources in many different areas of business, what were some of the major changes you recognized in the field that supported growth with small businesses and other changes that hindered it?
Absolutely. So, supporting growth in small business, one of the things that came out of the lockdown era of the COVID pandemic was people had to work remotely when they could work remotely.
Right.
Some jobs, of course, must be done in person because you can't remotely build a building,
Yeah. You can't remotely not work in a hospital.
right? Even then, though, we have more telehealth than we've ever had.
And I was just talking to my doctors last week in North Carolina, and a couple of them were so against it. When I go in there and he assesses my lupus, he's touching my hands.
Yeah.
He's filling my lymph nodes. He's like, I can't do this remotely. I have to be with you to be able to touch and feel and look and see how you're walking,
Yes.
your gait, all these different things. He's like, I can't do that remotely.
Yeah, and that's something that we're coming up against is this rush to change. Every pendulum swings and then it kind of evens itself out. And so we had the huge pendulum swing of, okay, everyone's remote. And so we can do everything remotely. And then there was, of course, a reactive thing of get these people back in the office. And now
Hmm.
swinging back and forth until we get to a nice happy medium that's still going to be further along with remote work than we saw before.
Yeah.
And honestly, it helps small businesses that have that access because, I mean, I work remotely. I have my home office.
Yeah.
There are some local to me clients that I'll come visit. But by and large, if I'm in Portland, Oregon, and you're in New York City, I'm probably not going to meet you in person. If I do, it will just be by happy accident rather than by that's the business model. And so I think that's one thing that's really helping out small businesses a lot. Over the years, I have seen so many different kind of cultural shifts in the way we do business. And I think that always happens generation to generation, decade to decade of just what makes the most sense. Because in my deep youth, it was kind of the end of the era of pension plans.
Mm,
And so who the heck has a pension anymore? Like every once in a while you'll hear of someone with a pension and say, "Oh, wow,
you're right.
that's the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. Unbelievable." Whereas now we're in 401ks.
Right.
That's been a major shift. So part of what has happened is a little bit of casualness crept in about educating people about what does this even do? What does this even mean?
Right.
And now we're reaching a point of, oh, that education is vital because any benefit you provide that you don't explain doesn't exist. Because if people can't use it, then you're paying for something that they're not using, or they're not using properly, or whatever happens that can do actual harm to your employees. And so that's been a shift of, oh, we need to educate people about this.
Yeah.
And so there's been a reassessment there. We've definitely been seeing some pendulum swing about diversity, equity, inclusion, and access,
Yeah.
and that's been happening. Our federal government has made some declarations about that, which has caused some different steps in different organizations. But what we're also seeing is that we're having more input from people about what that means to them. The big example of the moment is Target.
Oh,
You had
yes.
Target
Huge.
say, oh, you know what? If we don't have to do DEI, we're not going to. We're going to cancel this. No big whoop. Move on with our day. And all of their customers said, we are not moving on with our day. And that to me shows a really strong change in our working population saying, hey, we know what's important to us and we're going to stand up for it.
Yeah.
And so, with small businesses in particular, you have this opportunity to be more nimble and to get people from wherever you need them and to say, okay, look, I can't give you benefits like Google. We're not going to give you free car washes and daycare because that's not in our scope. We may not even be able to provide you dental and vision care. But what we can do is really think about providing meaningful work in a good work environment that you want to spend your time in,
Yeah.
with people you want to spend your time with. And we're going to take what you find important and make sure that it's important to us too. And if you do that, if you have a decent product and you have a work environment that people are clamoring to get into, you kind of can't lose.
Boom. So true. Having worked in so many different communities, what leads the charge are the people. And if they feel valued, if they feel heard, if they have a voice to offer some insight, wisdom, innovation, and they feel part of a community, this is very Adlerian psychology,
Yep.
they really will work for you and for the company because they feel like they're part of something, a part of a community.
Yeah.
People become discouraged when they feel like they're outside of that community or they aren't part of. And so they start pulling back, becoming more reserved, not quite appreciating their environment or the culture that they're working in. So you see kind of begin to fray when those things occur. And I think right now we're seeing a lot of changes, although we're shifting with the DEI subject. We are hearing about what people want and don't want in regards to the voices out there, a lot
Yeah.
more voices. And I can tell you, there was something that happened with Target, and I wrote the manager and I said, hey, listen, I love the store, but I'm having an issue right now because
Yeah.
of your shift with your DEI approach. And they answered me back.
Yeah.
And I was like,
Yeah.
good, thank you for at least answering me back because there are a lot of people in this particular area that I live in that are part of a demographic that, hey, they're your employees, man. So how are
Yep.
you taking care of them? How are you understanding what their beliefs and ideas about value and culture and work culture is? So
Yeah.
they did answer back and I was good with that.
And that honestly, what you just said is vital. That communication of I see you and I hear you
Yeah.
genuinely. And especially in the times when you cannot tell people what they want to hear. In those times when your employee wants something that you cannot give them,
Yeah.
having that foundation of hearing them communicating and treating them humanely, and then being able to say, I hear you and I understand you, and this is why I'm going to tell you no. You are much more likely to have that reaction that you had of, okay, I understand and I'm good with that.
Yeah.
Rather than this happens every time. I can't even believe these people. I'm going to start looking for a new job.
Right. That's where the dissension, that's where the conflict comes in. That's where they start feeling like they're part of the outside or skirting around the issues and saying, okay, I'm just disgruntled now. I don't
Yeah,
want to be a part of this. So just being able to have that conversation is so important because it gives somebody who might have been in the dark some light to why you're doing what you're doing. And they may not
absolutely.
have all the answers. They may not be able to solve the problem, but if you're having that authentic, transparent communication, that's so important. But here you are, you're HR. So that manager, that person might come to you and say, Kathleen, what can I do? How can I say this? How can I explain this where I'm not going to get myself into a hot mess?
Hmm. Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
and that balance is so important to be a humanistic business owner. You want to help your culture, you want to help your workplace culture, but you also need that protection of
Yeah.
how do I say this? How do I approach this? And that's so crucial.
Yeah, and it helps you in like several different ways, just directly. One is reducing turnover. Turnover of an employee can cost 150% of their annual wage on average just to replace someone once you bring in all of the hard and soft costs. So it's outrageously expensive to have people leave for whatever reasons.
Yes, so that retention is so critical.
It's critical. But then also, not just that retention, but if
Yeah.
you are genuinely having this communication, and when you're telling people things that they don't want to hear, if you're willing to listen to things that you don't want to hear, you are way more likely to come out of the other side with a solution you never would have thought of, that you never would have gotten unless you'd listened to the people who actually do the jobs that they're doing every day. And once you listen to them, even if it's not a full implementation of what they thought they wanted or what they needed or whatever it is, the idea that they came to you with, if you are genuinely listening and genuinely making good faith efforts to incorporate that thought into your business plan, it's win-win-win.
Absolutely. I love everything you're saying here. My next question.
Yes.
You identify an organization's unique DNA. Can you walk us through just a bit about what that means and how it influences the customized HR strategy you help companies create?
Oh, absolutely. So the unique DNA, what I see for that is even two companies that are purportedly doing the same thing. They offer similar products, they're about the same size, they're both in the United States. They're different companies. And that's what we find in mergers and acquisitions. M&As fail 90% on not thinking about the people side when they're just glomming these two companies together and all of a sudden they discover that these two corporate cultures have very different expectations of what is a business and how do we do this. And so when I'm working with each company, I do not want to offer a cookie cutter solution. There may be some things that I'm going to say to everyone, such as, yes, you need an employee handbook. I am, however, not going to say you need the exact identical handbook for every company, especially because, as we said before, labor laws are different everywhere.
Yeah.
But also, what's your tone? What's your need? What are you trying to accomplish here? When you go through and have policies, why? Why do you have the policies you have? What do you want to communicate and achieve with what you're doing? And also with your systems, what are you trying to achieve with your payroll system? And yes, the first answer should be paying your employees. But the next answer is what kind of information are you storing? Do you have hourly or salaried people or both? Do you need to track things like projects based on hours? What kind of things are you trying to do? And then, frankly, what, other systems do you have like accounting software? What other activities do you have that are going to come into the things that come into your people systems? What problems are you having right now? What successes are you having right now? What's working super well for you and why? And ultimately, also, how are you growing or shrinking and
Hmm.
why? What is your goal and how fast do you want to get there? Because one of the things that working in startups taught me was it is so easy to go into hyper growth and grow like a big tree and topple over like a tree with no roots.
Mm.
Because if you don't build the foundation as fast as you're building your personnel base, guess what? All of a sudden, you've got 100 strangers that you don't even know what they want. And they probably also don't know what you want.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you might get into this, like I see this all the time of, we're so stressed out. We need to grow. We need to hire. We need to hire. Wait, that was actually a 3-month project. What do we do with these people? I guess we fire them now. And that's a terrible business model. Take a quick couple days to really focus in on, okay, I understand that we're stressed and we need to relieve this stress. And yes, the answer is people, but what people and what is their future? And I mean, anyone here, if you are hiring people, if you take away nothing else from me today, take away this. Your job description is a marketing tool. Figure out why people would want to work for you, not just what you want from them, but why people want to work for you and really think about long term what that means. If
Yeah.
you can communicate that in your job description, you're going to get all the good people that you want.
Oh my gosh, I love all of your guidance here. From that one tip that you just gave to knowing that all these different companies, big or small, have a different DNA set. And
Yeah.
you can take something that looks so similar, but they may not need the same handbook. But a good assessment will help you determine what are some of the things that these people need based on their, like you said, their DNA.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. This has been so incredible. But as we come to the close of the interview, if you were to give the listeners and business owners one tip about what to look for in an HR consultant, what would that tip be?
Someone who hears you. There are so many HR in a box solutions which have their place and they are fine to have because they'll give you your labor laws and they give you your basics of like, how do you set up and how do you just get going? Having someone who actually listens to you and partners with you and solves your problems and gives you a future, that is going to put your business on the actual track you want it to be on. So if you find HR support, whether that's a fractional person like me, whether that's a part-time employee, whether that's actually an HR group that you like and you can talk to the people there, people who actually listen to you, understand your business, and put your business goals as the reason for their support for you, that's where the magic is.
That is a great tip. My last thing I want to ask you is about your podcast. Success
Yes.
is weird and messy. Tell us a little bit more.
Well, it's funny. I said earlier that name came from my philosophy of people are weird and messy. And
Yeah.
so when I started putting together my podcast, I thought, well, what should I call this? And well, that was the obvious answer because as a business owner, and especially as someone who I work alone a lot, I work for my clients, but I'm doing their work by myself in my home
Yeah.
office. It can feel very much like the world around me is full of successful entrepreneurs who had a straight line to success of, I thought of an idea and now I'm doing it. And that is not my story. And I don't think that's anyone's story, really.
No, it really isn't. You're so right.
No. And so, what I wanted to do was talk to all of these experts that I know and don't know of just here we are in the world doing amazing things. And I want to hear about what they do in their business. But then also, how do we get here? What has been our weirdness that has gotten us to where we are? Because even in starting a business, you think, I'm going to do this thing. And then 5 years later, you realize I'm not doing that thing exactly,
Yeah.
or maybe at all. But this is my successful business. And I don't know, I love talking to people about that. And I just think that that's the kind of podcast that I wanted to see in the world
Yeah,
of just
absolutely.
hearing people's stories.
Well, I love it. Thank you, Kathleen, for joining me on the Core Women podcast today.
Thank you for having me. This was so much fun. I love it.
I had a blast. You can follow Kathleen Gabriel on LinkedIn and at www.gabrielhr.com. Additionally, make sure to check out her awesome podcast, Success is Weird and Messy, on your favorite podcast platform.
Thank you for joining us on the Core Women podcast with Dr. Summer Watson. We're so glad you're here and would love to connect more with you. Find us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Core Women and on Twitter at Core Women 1. For more about Core Women and Dr. Watson, visit corewomen.com. Want more support and resources for amazing women like you? Great! Join Dr. Watson and Jen Fontanilla at the Life, Love, and Money Collective, a Core Women production that aids in understanding the key traits that might be getting in the way of living a life that you are absolutely passionate about. Connect with Summer and Jen and find out more at thelifeloveandmoney.com.